It's no secret that Hollywood is known for its secrets, but it's not often that we get to speak with someone who has worked on the inside of that industry. On this episode of Forge and Anvil, I will be joined by Lisabeth Lange to discuss Hollywood narratives and her new fictional book that holds a lot of real world truths about how media impacts us all. All of this and more, so stick around. Welcome to Forge and Anvil, where we hammer out uncomfortable conversations to sharpen ourselves for the cultural, political, and spiritual war that we are living in. My name is Connor. I am host of this podcast. I am a husband, a father, and a follower of Christ Jesus, doing my best to represent him well wherever I can. As I mentioned in the intro, I am joined by author Lisabeth Lange. So, Lisabeth, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Hi, Connor. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you tonight and your guests. So I am just published my first novel, like you mentioned, a fictional novel. However, a lot of stories are based on truths. So there's lots of glimpses into truth in it. And I hope through the novel, the intention is to inspire and to find your own truth. Besides that, I did, like you said, work in Los Angeles for many years, particularly in unscripted television when reality shows became very popular. So there was a lot going on, a lot of shows. I was specifically in casting. So I casted for Extreme Home Makeover, The Biggest Loser. I did a lot of children's, there's a show called Endurance. It's like a children's survivor. And amongst other things. However, those were the main ones.
Awesome. Well, glad to have you on the show. And before we get much further, for you in the audience, feel free to go over to our Substack if you haven't already. It is forgeandanvil.substack.com. You can put in your email there to get free content from yours truly. I put out articles, and of course, I give you updates on the show, and I post every episode of the show there as well. And you can also check out our In the Van segments, which are short segments where I break down a story in the news in usually 20 minutes or less. So for those of you who like to watch things on double speed, you can get all your news in 10 minutes at the start of your day. So feel free to check that out. And of course, go over to our Twitter and follow us there. At Forge and A is the handle, and I'll post updates on the show, and I'll do a lot of other shenanigans on there as well. So be sure to join us to be a part of it. But yeah, Lisabeth, so you were originally recommended to me by Adam Coleman, a mutual friend of ours, and he, of course, has been a big part in helping you to put out your book. Adam's a great guy, so I definitely, when he told me that he highly recommended you for the show, I went ahead and said, sure, let's do it. So, and then when I found out that you have experience in the realm of Hollywood, I thought that's interesting, given a lot of the different topics that we've discussed on this show about Hollywood and its impact on broader culture. So maybe go ahead and just tell us a little bit more about your story. What got you initially involved in Hollywood? How did you get there? And what kind of things you experienced sort of behind the curtain in Hollywood?
Sure. So originally, my desire was to just communicate on a mass level. I wanted to do travel journalism particularly. And I did intern for a rather well-known travel journalist for a few years. And that was in LA. It was a huge learning curve on many levels, on every level. Very challenging as well. However, I am thankful for the experience. But I did eventually get out of that and into more of the television side, not just the journalism side. I can only speak from my experience. I don't necessarily know how scripted or unscripted, reality is. There's a lot of story producers. Everything's controlled. Of course, there are millions of dollars. But there's also a lot of walls up to do anything different or to change anything or to try and do anything different. I thought there would be more avenues per se to do maybe something more positive, specifically something with news that would be more on the positive end of things instead of just this constant, negative cycle, that always bothered me. That's where my questions led, is what is that doing to us as a society and individually? this constant flow of information that's negative or fearful or anxiety driven. And then I just kept having questions and nothing was answered, and it became more of a reflection. And that's sort of where the writing came in, to discover those reflections and questions for myself.
Okay. Yeah. And then from there, I mean, obviously you spent quite a bit of time in Hollywood before you moved on, from my understanding, given the fact that you worked on multiple different projects. At least you had a lot of exposure, given your time frame there. So I know you mentioned that you can never tell how much is fully scripted and whatnot, but you did say that you noticed there was definitely a rut that you had to stay in. You couldn't really deviate from that. So we, of course, tackle a lot of subjects that are important to the culture from a Christian standpoint, a religious standpoint. Was there any, to your knowledge, did you ever encounter any hostility towards people of faith, especially since you did casting? Were you ever encouraged to go out and get specific type of people in your casting? Tell us more about that.
I can't necessarily speak as far as a religion preference or anything like that. I never felt that or was told that. So, and like I said, I was there very early on when things just started blooming with the reality TV. It was crazy. So I did not run into that personally. No. I think there's a bigger, I tend to look at the whole broadcast of whatever it is, whether it's news or television shows, scripted, unscripted, and movies. I look at it from, 35,000 feet, where I see it's just this mass tool to keep people under a certain, narrative or a certain, especially news, in my opinion. That was really what I struggled with, news in particular. Right. And so it's like, well, they're just, to me, it's just very, very orchestrated, so orchestrated. There is no, I guess a surprise to me was the lack of spontaneity and the lack of new ideas, super controlled, which I didn't like, which I resisted.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you talk about coordination. So since you, when you look at it from 30,000 feet, you think that it's coordinated. So what kind of things lead you to believe that? Did you ever witness any, head decision makers calling up other head decision makers from completely unrelated topics and kind of coordinating what sort of message that they were both sending out? I mean, what kind of things did you witness there?
No, I was never in those conversations. I wasn't that high up, but it's, I think if you just step back, you can witness that. Anybody, you yourself, you don't, if you detach from all the media that we're inundated with and, kind of return to self, I think that's when you could recognize some of those reoccurring themes and controls and just leading people. If media wants to agitate fear, they agitate fear. If they want to agitate anxiety, there's anxiety. If they want everyone glued to the television, this big thing happened. There you are at your television. It's almost like you're a slave to it. Which then you say, well, who really has the control here? I feel like I'm the one deciding to turn on the TV, but are you?
Yeah.
That's
well, similarly to like social media, outlets. I mean, it's meant to be addictive. Social media may be more addictive than certain television shows, but ultimately it's all meant to be attention grabbing and to give you dopamine hits, definitely much stronger than doing something like, say, reading a book, which is why we have so many watchers and so few readers. You mentioned disconnect. So is that, you could tell us a bit more about your book here. Is that some of the messages that you're hoping to send with your book?
Correct. The character sort of goes through, she has to figure something out, looking for what had happened to her mother who disappeared. But it's the wrestle and the constant interaction with media, because they know the story, but she's wrestling with her inner truth and her intuition, what she knows to be true. Yet there's all these external messages, constantly coming at her. So where do you find the truth? And that's where my main character goes. We follow her on that journey.
So I'm assuming that journey must have had a lot of personal relation, given, I mean, an author pretty much is never able to fully remove themselves from the writing process. So obviously you're talking a lot about media. So did you put yourself in the protagonist's shoes when you were writing this novel? And did you feel like you had a similar struggle with disconnecting from media and the narratives being shoved your way?
Sure. So yeah, there's definitely part of me in I actually believe almost every character, which is interesting. But yeah, through the female protagonist, it allows me to explore that. Like I said earlier, it was a reflection of many questions I had. I wouldn't say entirely me, but yeah, it was an avenue because, right, it's really difficult to completely separate yourself from everything. Like I said, I could be in many different characters that appear or traits. And yeah, so that's why writing can be therapy, I guess, in a way, right?
Yeah, of course. Well, tell us a little bit more about what you like. Who's the ideal audience that you are aiming this book towards? Like when you think of the character type of an individual that you want to pick up this book and read and learn from, who are you aiming at?
Anybody over the age of 18, honestly. It's for new adults, young adult, and up. I mean, I have my former college professor loved it, where I have girlfriends who love, or people even younger than me have read it, 15-year-olds. So because it is sort of a coming of age, it's a girl on her journey. So we kind of follow that journey through time. It's a meaningful adventure in a way.
And what kind of lessons does the protagonist learn along the way?
Well, that it's difficult to find and to keep your own intuition and voice, and that you have to trust that. And how do we continue to trust that when the noise is so loud, when we have so much social media, when we have television, when we have news? It's about staying true to that and her struggle to maintain that connection.
And so for yourself, do you feel as though you throughout the process of writing this book, you mentioned writing is therapeutic, and I definitely agree with you. Do you feel like you learned some of those same lessons? I mean, what kind of lessons did you learn in the writing process?
Oh gosh. So, I mean, there's so many there. It's challenging for sure. And to keep with it is definitely challenging, especially when you hit roadblocks or you just hit parts of the novel that you're like, oh gosh, I don't. So there's a lot that's challenging that you learn from. But as far as the story went, I always knew I'd find it, that I kind of let it lead me instead of me taking it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. So obviously this book is talking about media narratives, and you're wanting to get people to recognize media narratives that they may be living underneath when reading this book. Are you familiar with the term predictive programming?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's something that's been in the news a lot lately, and in cultural commentary all over the place, is the idea of predictive programming. Currently, right now, one of the great examples of that is we currently see in theaters the movie about the Civil War, the American Civil War, the coming American Civil War, I should say, and of course, many individuals are starting to say that this is a left wing movie. It's making out the antagonist, the president, as Donald Trump, and so it's kind of providing predictive programming that Donald Trump, should he win in November, is going to bring about a new American Civil War. So obviously that's very heavy-handed predictive programming, but what's your overall take on just the Civil War movie and predictive programming in general?
That's interesting. So I did hear about it through somebody else. I choose specifically, not to expose myself to it. Not just that, but many types of media, I kind of guard myself. And if I need to know about it, I'm sure it will find me, as with anybody. And yeah, I mean, if besides the predictive programming, which I'm not an expert on that. However, I do, no matter what, it contributes to fear.
Mm.
So, and just tension, whether or not those are side effects of the predictive programming, it just raises all those sorts of negative feelings or thoughts, and if you're constantly fed negative thoughts and fears, and your thoughts are very, very powerful, I just think that's lack of control. We're handing over such a valuable part of ourselves if we are allowing that constant exposure, especially because it's filled with the fear or filled with anxiety. The message is very alarming, right? Oh gosh, and setting it up that way. And yeah, I mean, it's scary in a way. So that's the thing that I don't like about it, that it tends to lead to those feelings and that can take over your thoughts.
Yeah. And I know that your ultimate goal is for people to take lessons from your book. Again, a heavy-handed example here with the predictive programming. But what kind of things have you done personally to actually disconnect from these narratives and to keep yourself from falling prey to the same predictive programming that maybe you can now recognize given your experience?
Right. I think, for me personally, anything to do with nature, being in nature, being outside, feeling like you're connected to something bigger. I practice meditation and yoga, which really helps me be in the moment and to recognize thoughts and what they're doing to you or not doing to you. And I just think being very connected spiritually, as I feel I've always been, it's something that I can't necessarily escape. It's just there and part of me.
And when you say connected spiritually, what kind of things are you referring to?
I've just always sensed a bigger plan, a bigger part of me. I've always felt that I have one foot here and one foot not here. And I think gives me a good perspective sometimes. However, it can be difficult to stay in the physical as well. I kind of like to fly a little bit, which the writing helps with.
Right. Yeah. So when you talk about being one foot here, one foot somewhere else, what area are you describing when you think of where your other foot is?
It's not in a physical realm to me. I don't, it's not like a, hard ground place. It's out there.
Do you consider yourself religious?
I've studied a lot of religions. I've practiced a lot of religions. I sometimes struggle with the institutionalized part of it, which can get murky and controlling sometimes. But no, I'm open to all of it. But I have studied many and practiced many. So
yeah. What ones have you studied?
I grew up Catholic, and then my parents did Christianity, so I was exposed to that. I studied Buddhism for a while, a little bit of Hinduism and Taoism, and then also Judaism.
Okay. So you mentioned at the beginning of our episode here, you mentioned your truth. You said something about finding your own truth, I think is how you worded it. So how would you describe, let me rephrase this. How do you find your truth as you are someone who is not committed to a particular faith, but you have dabbled in multiple areas? So how do you ultimately ground yourself?
Well, God is truth. So pure and simple, and my soul and spirit are part of him. So truth is within and truth is with God, and that's where I find it.
And so when you say God, I mean, which God are you referring to?
The one energy of God, the essence of spirit.
So you would say you're monotheistic then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm just curious because your faith story is really interesting to me because one of the reasons why I'm so curious about it is because obviously you've spent a lot of time in Hollywood, you spent time in journalism, and those are very secular institutions. It's pretty rare that we see someone that can be in those institutions and have any form of faith, let alone a cohesive one. So you're monotheistic, which is great because so am I, of course. I'm a Protestant Christian. That is what I believe. I believe that there's only one true God, and I agree with you that God is truth. I think that He's everything good, true, and beautiful. You mentioned how you like to spend time in nature. So, how would you say that nature affects you when you're thinking about yourself in the spiritual realm?
Sure. So I think what I see in nature is is life and a constant cycle that always it can be counted on, and it's just I really can tune into even the littlest things and just be so grateful and thankful because to me it's spectacular. And especially being alone in nature or just being outside, even taking a walk in your neighborhood can be so rewarding and so great for you. So I just think it's also a reminder of something bigger and larger than ourselves, and the expanse of it and the beauty of it. And I think there's so many healing benefits of it on many levels, mentally, emotionally, and obviously physically. There's so many things from nature that heal us. So I think that's super powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, Romans 1:20 says, "For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse." So, I mean, to me, that verse definitely affirms what you're saying. In nature, I think it's easy to sense ourselves as not being physical, merely flesh and blood, but we are spiritual beings that we are longing for something. For myself, I've always been a real homesick kind of person, and I have moved a few times in my life, and I have always felt like I am trying to get back home. And when I look back at the places where I came from, although I would call them, I could say that my heart is partially there in some ways, as I have friends and memories and family. I look back and I don't ever feel like that is fully home for me. And the more that I continue to the longer I live and go on with life, the more I just realize that I am a sojourner here and that this is not my home. And ultimately, my home is on the other side. So, have you ever sensed something similar when it comes to your time out in nature?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can say exactly like yours because I may not fully understand your experience. But yeah, like I said, the perspective, the reminder, that something's bigger and greater than me and all powerful and amazing, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't take it for granted. And I think it provides a lot of introspection, so easily, which is wonderful if you just allow it. If you're open to it and allow it, it can really set you right in a way.
Yeah.
In those moments, you may need it,
Of course. And you're an author, so you understand the idea of of writing a character and place them in a story. So, ultimately, I would say as a Christ follower that we are a part of His grand story, and ultimately, we find ourselves in the middle of it. And so, when we talk about writing narratives, which is kind of our larger theme of this episode today, it's just interesting to immediately be able to point towards a one true narrative that I can see across my life. And I take us on this detour, kind of exploring your past with spirituality and religion. All that to say that that you were deep into the world of spinning narratives and casting individuals. You wrote a book about it. You're exploring these things. You would probably, I would assume, say that you're still in the process of unpacking, all these things that you've experienced. And I think we are all, to some degree, always in that stage. But for me, every time that I have found myself in these narratives, and just to speak personally for a moment, prior to 2020 and the lockdowns, I was pretty much asleep, just kind of wanting to do my own thing, living a very self-centered life, just focused in on what I was going to do, what I was going to do with my career, and what the next stage of my life looked like. I had my identity in a career that no longer was available to me. I had a new marriage, trying to navigate that relationship while at the same time feeling like my identity was torn out from me. And when lockdowns hit, I had this big moment where the blinders were off, and suddenly, the outside world enforced itself into my sort of inside bubble, and I realized, oh my goodness, there's so much that is beyond my control, and if I don't address these things are going to want to enter into my space and enter into my family. And so to me, that was a wake-up call, and I started to just search for answers, and I found many individuals that I would consider to be my teachers, both on the internet and in person, that really helped me to wake up and understand sort of the craziness of the times that we are living in. And these were men of Issachar who understood the times that I was beginning to learn from. But all throughout that, the thing that I had the benefit of is I was always able to go back to my faith and use my faith as a way to stay grounded, and to realize that even when I was in the midst of narratives that were being thrusted upon me, I was able to look back and say, no, I've got this greater truth that's completely removed from all these things that are trying to absorb me and tell me what is true. And I have a North Star that I can point to that is unmoving, that I'm able to seek out as my guiding light on the ocean of uncertainty. And so I'm curious, since you've had sort of a mixed relationship with your spiritual journey and different faiths, what kind of things have kept you grounded? Have you sensed any of that? I mean, has the Catholicism that you were raised under and the Christianity that you were exposed to, has any of that played a role in keeping you grounded as well, you think?
It's actually difficult for me to say, because I have felt this my entire life. Like, I don't recall not feeling a sense of purpose or duty ever. Like, even as a child, I felt a calling. And even though it led me into media, I believe that was for a specific reason, to learn about it, to maybe understand a little bit of it. And ultimately, I believe you can't change something unless you get inside of it, including yourself. So including media, including whatever it is. So even though I may have been in the, lion's den, where a lot of negativity is around you and a lot of, maybe not so great things, I truly believed I was there for a purpose, and I have never wavered from that. I may not always know what my purpose is, but it's just a sense I have always had and always carried with me. And I'm not sure if that's attached to any specific religion. So I can't define it entirely, because it's just a very personal thing.
Right.
And it's different for everybody.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And, for my end, I believe that we're all made imago Dei, or we're made in the image of God. And I think that naturally, that naturally puts a longing for purpose naturally in us. And I think that it's easy to sense, to some degree, a general understanding of that North Star that I mentioned. I think that we're all longing for something. I think we all have a God-shaped hole in our heart, and we're all longing to find something to fill that hole. And so some of us will explore many different things until we find it. Some of us will be lucky and land upon it early on in life. And we all have our own different stories and testimonies. But in writing your book, do you feel like this sort of explorative part of your personality shines through with your characters?
Yeah, there's a little bit, right? Certain characters, definitely certain plot lines. Yes, and ultimately, there is one storyline that we're talking about all these messages we're receiving from a particular media company, and it's a very large media company. And one of the characters had discovered this new element that had never been discovered before, and they weren't sure where it was from, blah, blah, blah. But the element represents your soul, and the messages and the media is, you will always have this connection with God or your source, okay? Because you come from something else, right? You're just in this physical realm. So what this media company does and what it is doing in the novel is it's basically cutting our cords. It's an interference to your connection. And so if you can take that into outside of the novel and say, yeah, if I allow the outside world to be an interruption to disconnect me from my higher power, then it will. And especially with the type of messages we're receiving, especially, like I said earlier, I know I'm being repetitive, but especially if it's negative. And I know the news can't be positive all the time. I get it.
Right.
I understand that, and things happen, and there does need to be reporting. But ultimately, I feel like it's a huge distraction, and there's so many things that are unnecessarily entering my thoughts that I don't want.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And, the Apostle Paul tells us to take every thought captive, and I really think that we can kind of baptize our minds and, allow ourselves to sort of recenter through the power of the Holy Spirit. But what would you say is your sort of central focus that you feel like media distracts you from?
Well, definitely like just being close to your purpose. I do feel like people or humans have so much potential and so much good. And I feel like that's being suppressed.
And what would you say your purpose is?
Well, hopefully talking to you about all this. No, that's what I mean. Hopefully to inspire people and to get them to ask more questions about all of this and to find their true north, like you said.
So which true north are you trying to point towards? Because again, I'm prying, and I'm doing that on purpose. I'm trying to get at something deeper here, and when you say that your goal is to help people find their true north. Well, obviously, based on what you've told me, I don't think you believe in a sort of a postmodern sense that, your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. It sounds to me like you believe that there is such thing as absolute truth, and there's such thing as falsehoods as well. So when you think of pointing someone to true north, I think to me, a dangerous message is, I want you to find your truth. Mm-hmm. And so when you think of helping people find their true north, what is the true north that you're pointing them towards?
Well, everybody's way there is their own, right? I mean, I can't determine that for you. You can't determine that for me. Everybody's journey is truly their own journey, right? But ultimately, it's God.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree that, I like, when I think of man's purpose, it's to glorify God and enjoy him forever. I believe that that is ultimately why we were created, to be in relationship with him. And so, when I think of, your background, I'm just curious, like, as of now, do you consider yourself, you said you're monotheistic. Do you consider yourself to be Catholic? Do you consider yourself agnostic? I mean, where are you at on your spiritual journey at this point?
I can't quite say at this point. I kind of let it take me where it needs to take me, because I'm always trying to learn. I think it's a constant learning process and growth and evolution process. So at this point, within the past couple years, I feel that I am close, and I feel close to God, but I'm not practicing anything particularly.
And is there, you mentioned, I think that you have an aversion to sort of the organized religions. Is that, would you say that that's kind of the main crux of the issue that keeps you from like committing to anything specific?
Sometimes, yeah. In general, it's just the institutionalized part of things. I think institutions, can take over and lose the meaning of, the essence of things, or, and then at the end of the day, they are run by men and women, and so sometimes, yeah, I do question that. I'm not going to like blame or fault, because it's a reality of our existence, but I do, yeah, sometimes I feel like institutions aren't great for people.
Yeah. And, I ask that because, obviously I'm a believer, and for me, just running this podcast, like I like to ask my guests, I like to get to know, especially when I have someone that's not also in my same camp, what kind of things have kept you away from the church, what kind of things draw you into the church. And I know that the institutions failing is a lot of what has driven people away. There's either true church abuse that they've witnessed or been a subject of, or there are individuals that maybe went to a church and just thought these people aren't serious. I'm fired up about this, and these people are wanting to just have a TED talk and a rock concert and go home about their lives and not have any real change take place. So I appreciate you giving me the insights, because it is helpful to me as someone who's looking to learn how I can better reach people like you who are maybe familiar with some of the aspects of Christianity, but you're still kind of in this explorative stage, and you're hoping to maybe you're not hoping necessarily to land somewhere in particular, but my hope for you obviously is that you come home to to faith in Christ Jesus. But that's just that's going to be the angle that I take. But what has have you noticed your book, in writing it, have some of these ideas been fleshed out further? And have you felt like you've grown spiritually as a result of writing this book?
What do you mean by some of the ideas fleshed out further?
Yeah, like some of these ideas that you've been wrestling with between different faiths. You've had time practicing multiple different organized religions. You do things like meditate, yoga. So obviously you mentioned that you're a spiritual person. So there's clearly there's something tugging at your heartstrings, it seems like, that is calling you to go deeper into something. But you're maybe not either you're not sure of what that something is, or you don't want to commit to a specific something. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But has your writing process provided any growth in that area?
The writing process definitely made me trust myself and trust in something bigger than myself. As I believe, and I know that some of the messages came to me, and they just come to you. I'm sure it's happened to you as well, and many, many other people. So by allowing that and trusting that, which can be difficult sometimes. So there's definitely growth. I'm not quite sure if it was spiritual growth, because I already felt these things prior to that journey. And actually my spirituality prompted the writing. So I think there's always, there is always growth in things. Maybe it was more of a self growth through the novel and shedding some skin and processing, those questions I had, and reflecting on them as well. But that's spiritual questions and coming from that source was always there. So that's sort of what drove me and what made me even attempt it in the first place.
Yeah. And in his sovereignty, I think God's allow you to write a great novel that hopefully will be very successful. So what kind of things about the book have you yet to tell us that you want to make sure that you get out that maybe we haven't touched on in my line of questioning?
Ooh, gosh, it's a good question. Yeah, like I said, that hopefully we're asking questions and we're connecting dots, and that it inspires the reader to ask questions and to reflect as well. That's my main hope and goal. And to just start maybe seeing things in a different way, not everything, but through themselves, through the reader's eyes,
Yeah. And do you feel like you have a sequel to this book coming, or is this going to be a standalone novel? What's your thoughts on that?
I am hoping for a series. I did leave, I had some resolution in the main story, but I did leave some plots open to explore more if I get the inspiration to continue. I feel a lot of it comes to me and it has to come naturally, because I don't feel like you can control inspiration and creativity. It just has to happen. And so if it happens, I would love to do a series.
Yeah, I think that'd be wonderful, and it'd be cool to see you develop as you continue on with writing a sequel, and and see if this could turn into something bigger than it already is. But tell us again the name of the book, and where can we go if any individual listening wants to support you and pick up a copy.
Great. So the name of the book is The Luminescence Manual, and that is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Or you can go to my website, which is my full name, lisabethlange.com. It's available through that. Or call me. No, just kidding.
Awesome.
Send you a signed copy.
Yeah. Feel free to put your number out there to the entire audience. I'm sure that's a good idea on the internet. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show, Lisabeth. It was great to get to speak with you, and I appreciate you humoring all my silly questions. I tell most of my guests always. I watched a few interviews that you did previously, and I tried to think of questions that maybe you hadn't been asked, so that we can try to get something new out of you, so that individuals can.
You do a good job then.
Well, I try. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Yes. But I know that the audience, I'm sure, has enjoyed our time together as well. So anything else that you want to plug before we bring it home?
No, just I'm happy to, if anyone wants to reach out, any questions, anything. So I'm open.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you all for listening. We really appreciate you joining us. Feel free, if you haven't already, to go over to our Substack, forgeandanvil.substack.com. We really appreciate your support. You can sign up there for free to get free content. And then, of course, you can also be a paid supporter if you feel inclined to do so. No pressure, though. And, of course, follow us over on X at ForgeandA. And you can join me there and follow me as I do all my unhinged ranting and trolling. So I really appreciate all of you considering that option available to you. So anyways, we appreciate all of you, and we'll see you next time.